WBC belt that has included Ali, the greatest of all time. They are set and ready to answer who's the greatest of right now. Wilder, Fury 2, here we go.
With this per tweet from Michael Benson, after hearing Amir Khan say he wants to fight Kell Brook in 2021, Eddie Hearn has revealed he messaged Khan. Hearn said they are planning to have talks when Khan returns from Dubai. There is still value in the fight. It's not as big as it once was, but we'll see.
Well, that answers that question.
When news broke that Amir Khan had all of a sudden become receptive to a Kell Brook fight in 2021, the biggest question on my mind wasn't whether or not the fight still had value. The fight, even now, in spite of being past the sell-by date to many of the Brits, in spite of that, the fight, depending on where you stage it,
And what's on the undercard?
the fight still has some value if you play your cards right. And what it's really a question of is whether or not Eddie Hearn still wants to bother with either of these two guys, either Amir Khan or Kell Brook. Ultimately, that's going to be the determining factor, because the fight in and of itself, even now, as hard as that might be to some of our friends over there in the United Kingdom, the fight still has some value, and it's just a matter of where you stage it. Currently, all boxing has been banned in the United Kingdom through the month of January. Not that it matters, because it's not like Amir Khan and Kell Brook would have been locking horns on that kind of schedule anyways.
They wouldn't.
Though even if the ban itself extends past the month of January, if it goes into February, if it goes into March, Eddie Hearn has declared he's got 5 UK shows ready to announce this week, including Povetkin vs. White 2 and Warrington vs. Sue. He said if they can't be in the UK due to the pandemic, they'll go abroad. Boxing cracks on, wherever it may be. It's happening. That being said, I imagine that a very similar thought process, a very similar can-do attitude will be implemented towards this Amir Khan versus Kell Brook fight.
It doesn't have to be in the UK.
It can take place abroad. It can take place in Monte Carlo. It can take place in Dubai. It can take place at several venue options around the world, because lest we forget, Eddie Hearn is in bed with DAZN, and DAZN has gone global to 200 plus territories around the world. That opens up a new door with new venue options that can still accommodate a UK audience that wants to tune in to see this fight.
But doesn't want to have to pay pay-per-view prices to do it.
You gotta remember, they don't have to bill it as a Sky Sports pay-per-view anymore for Sky Sports pay-per-view prices to the UK audience. DAZN is an option, and what DAZN is costing the Brits is less than what it's costing the Americans here stateside. What are they paying, like $1.99 in UK money, which roughly translates into $2.71 American. That's several times less than what the British boxing fans would have had to have paid to see Amir Khan, Kell Brook on a Sky Sports pay-per-view. It's a lot more affordable now. The only hindrances this fight might be facing here and now are, the times of engagement. What does Kell Brook want for the fight? What does Amir Khan want for the fight? Can they reach agreeable terms, since Eddie Hearn, as it turns out, is receptive to making the fight, to delivering it.
The revenue splits.
The contracted weight for the match. What's this supposed to be, a welterweight contest, a super welterweight contest? What are we talking about here? At what weight is the fight going to be fought?
Kell Brook is coming off of a knockout loss.
I think most people will agree that both Kell Brook and Amir Khan are knocking on the door of retirement. I mean, you can forget about seeing these guys in there with the cream of the crop in the sport of boxing. Both of these guys, they're both circling the drain, and that creates an environment where both guys are going to be driving a hard bargain in what looks to be their last hoorah. The last hoorah for the both of them.
They'll both be looking to cash out.
They'll both be looking to make as much as they can off of this event, off of this fight, these two very bitter domestic rivals. I think that this fight has cleared at least one obstacle. That obstacle being, whether or not Eddie Hearn wants to work with either of these two guys. Kell Brook in particular, who not that long ago, he was on bad terms with, being kept out of the loop, negotiating the Crawford fight without him, and Brook being bitter that Sky Sports decided not to pick up the Crawford fight, that arm of revenue not being made available. I mean, that was one obstacle that I think needed to be cleared, and it has been cleared, but there's a new set of obstacles.
The terms of engagement.
The terms of the fight. Reaching agreeable terms between these two domestic rivals, Kell Brook and Amir Khan. Can they iron out a deal? I think that staging the fight on the DAZN platform as opposed to the Sky Sports platform will actually help to draw more of the fight fans' eyes over there in the United Kingdom than the alternative, because it's a cheaper alternative for the UK fight fans. Like I said before, depending on what you put on the undercard, this thing might actually still be a financial success that does garner itself some attention. The hindrance it faces now is getting these two guys to agree to terms, to agree to a deal. So
It's not exactly a guarantee it gets made.
it's not set in stone. There's still plenty of room in there for things to go wrong, for negotiations to fizzle out. So we'll just see what happens, and we'll just see if the long-awaited, long-anticipated,
Too long.
past the sell-by date fight between Amir Khan and Kell Brook comes into fruition. In light heavyweight news, Zurdo Ramirez had this to say. He says, "I want Bivol, I want Beterbiev. I will beat them all at light heavyweight." The unbeaten super middleweight titleist enjoyed a celebrated return 2 weeks ago, fighting for the first time since last April and scoring a 10th round knockout of Alfonso Lopez. Their bout topped an independently promoted pay-per-view event which was carried live by Fight FITE TV under Ramirez's own Zurdo Promotions banner. It was his first in-ring action since severing ties with former promoter Top Rank earlier this year. A lengthy battle which ultimately cost Ramirez a place in a four-man World Boxing Organization light heavyweight tournament. Now armed with 2 knockout wins in as many fights at light heavyweight, the unbeaten Mexican now sets his sights on much bigger game. "I felt great. I was gone for more than a year and now I'm back," Ramirez told Fight TV's Matt Stryker after the win. "I want Dimitri Bivol, I want Artur Beterbiev. Both are widely regarded as the best 2 light heavyweights in the world today. Russia's Beterbiev, who now fights out of Montreal, serves as the division's lineal champion along with owning 2 alphabet titles. Bivol, a 30-year-old Kyrgyzstan-born light heavyweight now based out of Russia, has held a major title since November of 2017 and is widely regarded as the division's best-kept secret and arguably its most avoided fighter. Should he have his way, Ramirez will take a fight with either of the two in a heartbeat for his next outing. Also on his radar is a showdown with the winner of the upcoming vacant title fight between Joe Smith Jr. and Maxim Vlasov, which takes place next February. "I want them all at light heavyweight," insists Ramirez, who held a super middleweight title for 3 years before moving up in weight. "I will beat them. I will beat them all. You will see."
I don't know if I buy into this stuff.
I don't know how much I can buy into Zurdo Ramirez wanting fights with either unified light heavyweight champion Artur Beterbiev or the winner of Smith Jr. versus Vlasov when, he was in a pole position to get those fights.
Yeah, when he was with Top Rank.
And for better or worse, Zurdo Ramirez decided to go his own way and do his own thing, start up his own promotional company. That's a decision that he made.
I'm not chastising him for it.
Not castigating him, I'm just saying that I don't know how much he actually wants those fights with those fighters when he could have pretty much got those fights by staying put, by staying right there where he already was. But he made a decision to go his own way. And some could interpret that, some might, as Zurdo, in effect, distancing himself from those fights, distancing himself from those fighters.
He was a part of that 4-man tournament.
Him, Umar Salamov, Maxim Vlasov, Joe Smith Jr.
But he left Top Rank.
So what are you telling me? You left Top Rank to get fights with fighters that you were already going to get when you were with Top Rank.
What?
Leaving Top Rank doesn't necessarily take those fights off the table because Top Rank works with other promoters. They work with Golden Boy. They work with Matchroom.
They have.
They had to work with the PBC to make that Wilder versus Fury rematch. So it's not like Zurdo has to be a Top Rank fighter to get fights with Top Rank fighters. It's just that, well, you were already going to get these fights. And you decided to walk away from that promotional company.
You essentially walked away from these fights.
So like I said, I don't know how much stock I have in Zurdo's call-outs. I don't know how much stock I have in Zurdo's candor. I'd sooner believe that Zurdo is more receptive to a Dimitri Bivol fight than either Joe Smith Jr. fight.
Or an ought to a Beterbiev fight.
I think it's because from where Zurdo is sitting, he's probably telling himself that, you take a risk on a Joe Smith Jr., you take a risk on an Artur Beterbiev, and you take that risk for top-rank money when, you take the same kind of risk with a Bivol, but you take that risk for matchroom money. Matchroom
Maybe pays you a little better than Top Rank would.
That's the look of it from where I'm sitting. I think that is the school of thought that Zurdo Ramirez is attending. He doesn't really want that Beterbiev fight or that Joe Smith Jr. fight. Rather, the winner of Smith Jr. versus Salamov. I don't think he wants the winner of that fight that bad because, you know what? You were already going to get the winner of that fight in that four-man tournament that you decided to walk away from. So I don't think he actually has his heart set on any of those opponent choices. My guess is if he's going to take a risk against someone, it'll likely be Bivol because he figures I'll make more money losing to Bivol than I'd make taking a chance on either of these two guys.
I think he wants to work with Matchroom.
I think that's his angle. I think that's what he hopes to get out of all of this. A multi-fight engagement with Matchroom that caps off with a Dimitri Bivol fight. It's just that it's been over 12 months since Dimitri had a fight. So in all likelihood, the next time he enters the squared circle, it's going to be a tune-up fight. It's going to be a lighter touch, a keep busy kind of opponent. I don't imagine it's going to be Zurdo Ramirez versus Dimitri Bivol next. I imagine that before it comes to that, if it does, what we might get is Zurdo Ramirez versus Callum Smith. Per a tweet from Michael Benson, Eddie Hearn has stated that he expects Callum Smith to move up to light heavyweight following his defeat to Canelo. He named Smith versus Joshua Buatsi as a potential future fight he'd like to make for a world title.
And that's possible, too.
That could happen, and maybe the winner of that fight goes on to lock horns with Zurdo Ramirez, or maybe that Buatsi fight don't happen and they put Smith in there with Zurdo straight away.
That could happen, too.
You've got to remember, Callum Smith is coming off a loss to Canelo Alvarez. That's one. And he's coming off an injury. That's two. Does Callum Smith want to face a highly touted up-and-comer like Joshua Buatsi at 175 pounds straight away? Or would he prefer to face a guy who moved up in weight like himself?
A guy like Zurdo Ramirez.
Zurdo, like Callum Smith, was a reigning champion in the super middleweight division. And in the super middleweight division, Zurdo was definitely an entertaining fighter to watch. Very scrappy, throws a lot of punches, but he wasn't exactly the biggest puncher there. And I'd wager that he's not the biggest puncher at light heavyweight either. I'm guessing that, Callum Smith, upon his ascent to the light heavyweight division, he doesn't want to jump into the deep end straight away. He wants to ease himself into that weight class. And that, comparatively, yes, there are risks in a Zurdo Ramirez fight. I mean, it's not like it's a foregone conclusion that Callum wins that fight. I think a lot of people out there might actually favor Zurdo to win that fight. If I'm being honest, better still, comparatively, Zurdo may seem like a more attractive option than running risks with a highly touted prospect in the light heavyweight division or what other more seasoned fighters are already there. I think Callum Smith and Tesco Joe would be receptive to a Zurdo Ramirez fight.
Maybe even more than a Buatsi fight.
Maybe what they do for Joshua Buatsi is throw him in there with Callum Johnson. I vaguely recall hearing some rumblings about that potential matchup. I guess the bottom line here is, in spite of Zurdo's call-out of Smith Jr. versus Vlasov, the winner of that fight, and Beterbiev and Bivol, I don't think any of those fights happen in the near future. And two of those fights, I don't think they happen at all. I can see a lot of things happening for Zurdo in the next 1 or 2 fights. But a Beterbiev fight, or a fight with the winner of Smith Jr. versus Vlasov, I don't see that. I think what Zurdo wants is to work with Matchroom. That's what I'm getting. That's the impression his movements have left me with. Let's just see if it happens that way. And finally, per a tweet from Steve Ken, I'm sure most of you have heard by now, just got off the horn with Mauricio Suleiman. Contrary to what some are saying, the WBC will call for a bout between Devin Haney and Ryan Garcia, who just won the interim title this weekend. And look, this announcement from the WBC, this mandate from Mauricio Suleiman, you have to remember whose title shot it is. It's Ryan Garcia's title shot. It's there for him if he wants it. And the question is does he want it? Does Golden Boy want it for him?
Right here and right now.
A very recent comment from Oscar De La Coca leads me to believe otherwise. He said, Ryan is ready to face anybody, that's never a doubt, but it's going to be on our terms, on the terms of Ryan Garcia. It doesn't mean business, no. When he's ready, when he wants to.
Here we go.
Every champion out there needs Ryan Garcia. It's not the other way around. With that kind of talk coming from Ryan Garcia's promoter, does it sound like they're jumping out of their skin and clawing at their faces to get Devin Haney in the ring, or is it the other way around? We know who Ryan Garcia has set his sights on. He seems to want a Gervonta Davis fight. Yet another fight that I don't think is going to happen in the near future, but that's what he's talking about. He's talking about fighting Tank Davis next. What? Anybody else?
He mentioned Devin.
He did. And people say a lot of things, but you'll excuse me for saying so. I don't imagine that either of those two fights are going to happen next, and that's what I've been saying in video after video. It's no different here. The WBC mandating that Ryan Garcia fight Devin Haney next comes at no consequence to Ryan. It's his title shot to take whenever he so decides to take it, and maybe he doesn't take it right away. Now, Ryan Garcia's fight with Luke Campbell, that being for the interim title, and the winner being the mandatory challenger to Devin Haney's world title, the full-fledged WBC title. That wasn't at the forefront of the match, you understand. That wasn't the focal point of it. That fell in the background. And the real focus here was seeing how would Ryan handle himself against a top 10 lightweight, a statuesque southpaw with an Olympic pedigree in Luke Campbell. That's what everybody was really tuning in to see. I don't think anybody really expected that should Ryan win the match, he's going to go straight into a Devin Haney fight. I didn't think that. I don't know if you did.
But I didn't.
The WBC ordering this thing doesn't guarantee that it happens. Don't you remember when the WBC ordered Jorge Linares to fight Mikey Garcia? Mikey Garcia, the then WBC lightweight champion, and Jorge Linares, who was in possession of a WBC trinket title, the diamond belt that services as a segue to fight for the full-fledged version of the title. They ordered that fight years ago and it didn't happen.
And nobody suffered any consequences as a result.
That was one of several fights that the WBC had ordered in sequence, and most of those fights didn't happen, didn't materialize, and I think that the same is going to apply here. In all likelihood, who Devin Haney is going to fight, what mandatory he has waiting for him that he might end up fighting, might actually end up locking horns with, I still think, is Javier Fortuna. Ryan, he's moving on his own schedule, doing his own thing on his own time. That's the look of it, and that's what the talk seems to be from his promoter, Oscar De La Coca. That being said, the WBC ordering this thing is just a formality. Ultimately, it's not up to the WBC to make the fight. It's up to these two guys and their respective promoters to make the fight.
And they've both got to want it for that to happen.
I think that Devin, Bill, Eddie, they might want it, but does Ryan, does Oscar,
Does Eric Gomez?
right here and right now, is this what they want to do next? I don't think so. I'm not convinced.